person cares about, from just having two places, one initial server vendor potentially, and then a bunch of stuff on the client, to allowing the server to stream stuff over to the client. Like if you have, let's say, a nested page layout where a few parts of those nested areas need data from the server, you can have the server request that data and stream updates down to the client as they start to render. I don't think that's a particularly precise definition of it. I'm really excited about it. I think it solves a lot of issues that folks, myself included, have had with React, where it's hard to set up server to client communications for anything more than just the initial render. But also, it's a slow rollout, and it's a really big paradigm shift. So folks, I think, are experiencing some pain there. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, a lot. Any comments to that, maybe?
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Billy for here. I think that one of the things that is regarding to the React server components is when the team from React present this idea. This idea, it was presented like for React, but when it was implemented in Next.js, that is opinionated framework. Right now, with the news that in React Canary will we have the React Server component in React, I think that is really good because it's not attached to a framework. It's like more attached to the library. That is really good, and is also give us the option to implement in other frameworks. Even when it has some issues, I think that I really like to have this option that put components in the server, even when the most people think that is not a good practice. I think that it will be depend of our product, the logic product, business logic. Because it's similar to, for example, when we have microservices or a monolithic project, and it's the same idea. It's like it depends of your business logic. Because sometimes it's good to use React Server components, but there are other cases that is not good because you are creating, you are putting so much effort in the server, and even when you have a super huge server, sometimes it's not a good idea to overload the server. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this might be the entire discussion of this event is this new feature. This is Jesse, by the way, senior developer advocate at MongoDB. You might also know me from my YouTube channel, CodeStacker. And pardon my voice because I'm a little under the weather. But so yeah, server components, I think that it is a good thing, and I think that it's really going to speed up our applications. And it's going to be really great once there becomes more adoption in other frameworks. I think initially, maybe many people believe that it is just a Next.js thing, but it's actually a React thing. So yeah, I think as time goes on, we'll see more adoption for it. It's going to improve, and like I said again, it's going to make our applications faster.
I have to agree with that, with everyone so far, Josh and Billy and Jesse. This is Heather. I'm a lead engineer at Stitch Fix, full stack, but some of our teams at Stitch Fix are definitely kind of working through the complexities of trying to determine how to render based on different considerations, whether it should be static or incremental or server side or client side. And I think that the server components in the future sounds amazing to have something that, depending on how we write our code, it will determine for us what what are the best ways to render. But I think right now we're kind of in that in between space of adopting it and also trying to figure out how to leverage, the current rendering modes within our stack, within our current architecture. So it's a really interesting space, and I'm excited to learn more about it and hear how other people are adopting it.
Yeah, well, hello everyone. My name is Facundo. I'm a developer relations engineer at Storyblok. Yeah, just wanted to say that I agree with those ideas. The concept of the server components looks pretty promising. Probably it's still young, I would say, or it needs a little bit more of development. But from my point of view, it will bring a lot of advantages as we will move the rendering to the server. I don't know. I've been in the development world for 15 years and seeing that the things are moving back to the server. It's kind of fun, let's say, or seeing how we are going all the way around to server side generation and those concepts. But it's true that the technology also evolved, and the servers that we have nowadays are not the same than the servers or the computers that we had a few years ago. Probably the situation right now with all the edge computing logic and all the different hosting options that we have in the market are helping to think about the rendering method that we will choose for our application. Like if we can move part of the rendering of the content or the application itself to the server, probably it makes sense and it will help the performance of our application and the user experience. The server components, yeah, I also agree that it's kind of confused that it's a particular framework specific, but it's true that it's from React, and I'm looking forward to see how this concept is being used for applications in the near future, but also how the concept evolves and all the work that the React team is putting on them. So yeah, super excited for this development.
Hi, everyone. This is Tony Alicea. I'm with the Smythe Group and tech educator, Udemy, Pluralsight, YouTube, a few other places. But yeah, I also agree with what folks are saying here. React Server Components are going to be another tool in the toolkit for devs using React. And at the same time, it's going to be, as always, I think, a study in understanding your needs of your application, your users, your environment to make good choices. So it's not going to become where, well, everything's a server rendered component now, because server rendered components do have limitations, like for certain kind of client side interactivity, state. So there's going to be a balance that we learn between what should be a client component and what should be a server component. And that's going to be a new piece of the architecture, and the degree to which your applications benefit from server components and other things coming along that server components are going to enable, I think is going to, as with so many things, be dependent on us getting a good understanding of their benefits and how they work, and then making architectural choices. So if you think about server components, I think about it like a new architectural choice at the component level. And you could potentially improve your performance with this new architectural option.
I'll just add to that, Tony. I totally agree. And I think that thinking of it from, our system and also the client perspective of like response times, CEO handling, all of the different considerations we have to think about depending on, whether it's a static page or a PDP or, all the different ways that we're going to be rendering things. It's not just a one server. It's not just server side or client side. I think we have to be understand a little bit more of the what we're trying to actually accomplish based on each, and consider each use case versus just adopting something because it's what everyone's doing or because it's new. So
Yeah, I can agree that it will be depend of the business logic and also the use case that you said. But there is a point that
I think.
I mentioned,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, that I mentioned before that is the last week when the team told us about the React Canary and this option that we have the use in React, the React Server components bring us really I think that I feel so happy because it's not attached again that a framework is for React, and this brings several options to create new things in the other frameworks that I previously mentioned.
Josh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sure. Very similar line. Um, One of the awesome things about React Server Components is that it's abstract agreed to any React on top framework, such as not just Next.js, but also, let's say, Remix. Um, but it also means that we're React specific. I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself and it's difficult to speak. Um,
And now we cannot hear you. And does anyone can hear Josh right now, or it's only?
I can't hear Josh.
Astro World. Oh, did sorry. My apologies. I'm having a hard morning. And I'll summarize. I think it's going to be really interesting to see every major piece of React tooling get a corresponding tooling piece in, let's say, Astro. You have Starlight, which is the Docusaurus equivalent. You have the general server rendering model competing with things like Next.js. It's a really interesting space to be.
I feel like it's been hard to get an understanding, though, of what React Server Components are and how they work. Even the React team still, I don't think, has fully figured out how they want to describe and explain React Server Components. So there's a lot of excitement out there, especially people trying them, but they can feel a bit abstract and a bit difficult to understand right now. I think because it's so early and because they are such a new paradigm. So if anybody out there is kind of trying to understand React Server Components, I think the way that I like to explain them is that you need to understand how client components work and how React works on the client first before you can understand server components. Some people out there have said, oh, well, with server components, now you just need to understand the server. And that's not really true, because the way React works on the client is that there's a complex set of JavaScript objects called the React Fiber tree that's holding on to what the DOM should look like. And then as our components are re-rendered, it figures out what changes need to be made to the DOM. So we've known that for years, right? Called the process called reconciliation. So React Server Components are running code on the server, and then they're returning a custom format called React Server Components Payload which essentially, if the way I like to describe it is, it's essentially serializing, like making downloadable a piece of that fiber tree, which then on the client React can do what it always does. It can say, okay, well, I see the updates that the server wants to make to the DOM, and now I'll reconcile from that downloaded piece of information. So it isn't that the server components are generating HTML. The server components are generating a format that React, the library, can consume, pull into its data structures, and then keep doing the work that it's always done for us all these years. So that's why there's limitations, but that's why it's also really powerful, because it's sitting inside the already existing code base of React as far as how things work. So either whether you're running a server component or a client component, you're still asking the DOM to be updated. But with the server component, you can deliver HTML first on the first render, and then later you can have the server component send the update, which is then going to be translated into React doing client-side updates to the DOM. So there's a lot of potential there. It opens up things like async and await. It opens up things like remote procedure calls, RPCs, and a lot of other small incremental improvements on processes that we already do in React. So it's really interesting, and if folks out there are kind of struggling to understand them, I recommend like just Googling around on React Server Components payload, where you can find some good blog posts about how RSCs work.
That's the best explanation I've ever heard. So yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more information from the React team, or a little more clarity on some of that stuff. But great job there.
Thanks.
Unless anyone wants to add something.
I would love to know, has anyone here tried out Million.js, the library that purports and seems to significantly speed up React applications in certain cases, specifically the runtime?
I haven't tried it yet, but I got to meet the creator at Next.js Conf, so he's pretty cool guy.
Me neither. I haven't tried it yet.
Me neither, but I tried Solid.js. That also is the other library similar to React, but with different way to compare the difference. Because currently in React, we are using the Bitrate DOM. In Solid.js, are using a fine grain. So the comparison between the difference in the DOM is a little bit different, and the performance is good, and the bundle is smaller. There is a chart where it shows us how is the performance between, for example, Svelte, React, and Solid.js, and has a really good performance. I know that this is a React discussion, but it's a good library.
I haven't tried Million beyond just reading about it and looking at documentation and things and listening to some interviews with the creator. I do think that it's interesting because it is a drop-in kind of performance improvement in a React application under certain circumstances, and only under certain circumstances. But I think it speaks to everything that's happening in React right now. I feel like React, where React has shown its age, started to be in performance compared to some of the other JS frameworks out there, especially coming out like Sada, like Quick. And so I feel like where we are seeing improvements right now in focus, things like React Server Components, things like Suspense, things where React is focused on improving the performance, because as far as how much JavaScript are we downloading for our React applications, how often are our components re-rendering, and that's where React Forget comes in, which is another topic, I suppose, of something that's coming, which is a compiler to help improve the performance of our components. All those things, I think, speak to the fact that in the real-world applications, while React has been performant enough for a long time, that there was other players out there and other needs where React was not performant enough, and so in comparison. So I think a lot of what's new in React is focused on whether it's perceived performance, like Suspense, so just perception by the user, or actual performance, like React Server Components. And the popularity of things like Million.js show that whereas maybe 6-7 years ago, developer experience was the fundamental thing that everybody wanted. Like, I want good developer experience. Now performance, good user experience, good business experience, good client experience, that's now stepping forward again. And that's important too. UX being just as important as DX. So I think that's all good things, and I think things like the popularity of Million is really just showing where we are right now in the space.
Does anyone want to add something here, maybe?
I do. Yeah, it's regarding to the React Canary that it was last week presented. That is the way that we manage the forms. Currently, in React is or in when you are in the client side and doing all the UI, sometimes you need other library to manage the way that you are doing forms. So in React, in the Canary, is presented like you can put the tag form, and after that the action, and attach a function right now. And this is the function that will you use when you do the submit. This is the way that is presented in the React Canary from the last week, and I think that is really good because you don't need to use a external library to manage the form, and this also, if you combine with the React Server components, you can do the form that do the action, and the action attach the function, and the function is a function from the server. I think that is really good, this optimization, because as I said, is always you need other library to do the validations, for example, try to create a better way to read the code when you do forms. And I think that we are doing forms so much in the life, because every form has validations, and the validations need to be clear need to be easy to maintain. So the way that they are put effort in try to do this developer experience better, I think that is amazing. And also, there are other, that is from React 18, that is the start transition. I think that this hook that is use transition is really good because also you are using in every UI the option to do the loading, and you retrieve information, or you do an animation, or do something that need to trigger a loading. And the way that they are incorporating those features are making the experience better for us to create better UI and easy to read. I didn't find side case that is bad. I think that I'm really happy with the news. I wonder what is the case that you feel that sometimes you feel bad with your code in React. For example, in my case, is the forms. I really hate the way that the first time I handle the forms. So every day when I see something that is regarding to how create forms in React, is that is like a, for me it's amazing because it's the first time it was a nightmare. What are your pain points with React?
Does any one of you have any experience with that? I just wanted to also say hello to our speaker here, Chris. Welcome in the discussion. If you want to say something, please accept our invitation to using microphone. Oh yeah, Chris is gone. Let's back to Filipa question. Do you have any experience or anything to share about that? Looks like
I can I'll just say like a pain point, probably because of something that I have worked with in consultation with dev teams to try to fix, and it's like a pet peeve of mine, and it's something that I was guilty of, years ago, and that is because is not using is overusing of divs in the returns from your React components. So there's just picking good HTML elements, but sometimes we're so lost in making a component work that we just kind of don't think about the final DOM and what we're returning from our React components, what that's actually going to end up with for like accessibility and things like that. So sometimes I look back at really old templates and I go, man, I was not thinking about accessibility. I was not thinking about what was returned from these React components, how it all gets strung together into 20 nested divs and no good HTML elements to help screen readers, things like that. So that's like a personal project of mine, is helping React devs to think about in their JSX what they're actually choosing, and not just returning divs everywhere like it's some kind of standard component.
Along those same lines is not using fragments to group components. So instead of using the div, and then a lot of times that div will then be at a higher level than what you expected in the final render. So use fragments where appropriate.
Yeah, 100%. As far as what's new in React, even though it's not really available yet, I kind of wonder if anyone has any thoughts out there on React Forget, because I think the idea of developers currently in React having to manually decide what's memoized with memo and etc. And that can be a pain point too, of just memo everywhere. Some dev teams just memo all the things, and some dev teams are making choices, and now React Forget is going to try to take that architectural choice away, so that we can focus more on business logic, so I think that's a good thing. I wonder about how it's going to affect anytime you add a layer of abstraction. That means it's harder to debug. So I wonder how that's going to work out with yet another layer of abstraction for devs to be unaware of or have to dig through if something goes wrong. So that's kind of my concern. But on the other hand, I think the pain point of having to decide what's memoed or just have memo everywhere in your code is a good goal to remove that from the React ecosystem. So yeah, I'm just really interested paying attention to React Forget. I wonder if anybody else out there has any thoughts.
I feel like we're seeing kind of a shift in a lot of things where abstraction is kind of the way of getting us to use things properly, maybe. So I'm hoping that these abstractions will help us just using memo everywhere, and it will improve our everyday development experience. But then being able to do those things manually where we might need to is still key. Still having access to do that. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know what your opinion is, but I feel like a lot of things that we used to use, like I mean, I still use, but like use effect and use memo and all these other things are now like, it seems like they want us to stop using them and use these abstractions instead. And again, hopefully these abstractions will help us to use them better, but I don't know what your opinions are.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that the issue with a lot of these React tools like UseEffect and UseMemo is that they've been used incorrectly a lot. Like UseEffect was used incorrectly almost immediately. And there's a whole page on the newer React documentation now dedicated to here's all the ways not to use UseEffect. And that's a sign, right, that there's an issue with how people are using the API. I think my take on it personally is that all of these things, UseMemo, UseEffect, they require a deep understanding of how React works internally in order to use them well. And I think that's always been true. And so by adding the abstraction layer, it removes that need to understand how React works internally to not make mistakes and foot guns when using these fundamental hooks. So there's a very interesting thing happening now where, all right, developers, we're not going to require you to understand how React works internally. We're just going to compile what you're writing, and then these hooks now become more like internal hooks that we're using for you. And so the benefit is removing the ease in which the developer can do things wrong, and the downside is that it is a layer of abstraction, so you have less understanding of how things work. But in general, I think I always try to go on the principle that if you make the right thing easy to do and the wrong thing hard to do, then you'll have a good framework. And I think that's in some ways where React and all these compilations and layers of abstraction are trying to go. And overall, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that also it depends on how you are using it at the use case that you are trying to solve. In different at different levels or in different ways. When thinking about the developer experience and the tools and libraries that are designed and developed, I think that at a certain point the idea is to abstract the developers to have to deal with certain situations that probably are not really related or they don't really apply to the use case that they are trying to solve. Of course, that having the option of going a little bit more deeper, let's say, on the way of configuring or managing things, like use memo, for instance, like not fully removing the possibility of managing that at a detailed level or a specific level, but also offering the possibility of abstraction of those cases. I'm thinking on concepts that have been appear with the years, like, I mean, other languages have their garbage collector that it's basically trying to verify which variables are being really used in memory and which ones are not, and based on that, take some automatic actions, let's say, but also having the possibility of customize that management and probably admin the specifics and each detailed aspect of your project or your particular use case or the one that you are trying to solve is also cool. From my point of view, offering both options or both alternatives, like relying on a feature from the framework to manage a certain aspect, or you being able to manage it, let's say manually or by yourself, are cool addendums, and it's something that it's beneficial to provide the different options to the developers.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, let me ask one more time, because looks like not all of you could reply to that, but maybe someone from the audience had an experience. You can also welcome to share that. So just please let us know if you want to talk, say anything. Oh, yeah, the Xavier. Okay, we need the question. Yeah, there is a thing that if you want to speak, you need to connect with the phone, because in other case we will not be able to give you any right to speak.
Okay.
Well, sounds like we can hear you, so please go on.
I think the thing with React, well, now we're starting to see more React TypeScript slowly moving up, but also, obviously, we're seeing plain JavaScript vanilla becoming a big thing, right? Or JavaScript vanilla or Common JS, whatever. But if I can pose a question, is at what point are we going to make the Node module more compressed, and when are we going to make the the deployment process a lot faster, because it's just so slow no matter what you do, uploading to Azure, AWS, through GitHub. It's just the obviously artifacts. It's just so much. Like, or is there going to be a point where there's just a React compression automatically installed through everything? And is there going to be a point where TypeScript is just going to, because I mean, at this point we have all this AI. At what point are we just going to have TypeScript just already implemented and already laid out for us for every single case use? I mean, I do see a lot of libraries, but I would like to just pose like an encouragement, like, to make our lives a little easier, because there's too much excess, there's just too much AI right now, and there's too much ability for React to just embed a lot of this into their systems. We can really create out so many libraries for TypeScript that all we would have to pull is like like, let's say if you're making a backend, right, Node.js, and you want to create a user schema, we should be able to pull that. We shouldn't have to take an open source, let's say, authorization for login and pull it from somebody else's source. Maybe we want to start from scratch. This should already be predetermined for, like, React, let's say TypeScript with backend Node.js TypeScripts. I just wish it would already be embedded in the code the moment you initiate and make your React repo. That's all I'm saying. And I guess the question would be, was that possible? And when will this be possible?
I think you speak to probably a fundamental complaint and issue across the JavaScript sphere, even just beyond React, which is the beauty of open source is that there's so many options. And the pain of open source is that there's so many options. So when it comes to React in particular, I feel like you're talking about boilerplate code, which you can, like you said, you can find open source boilerplate starter things out there. Some of the other players out there are also embedding, like, starting boilerplate into their CLIs. So you can say, new app for this framework, and then it does give you some of those things. So I think we're seeing that in the ecosystem, the general JavaScript ecosystem more. I feel like React, and I know I'm not part of the React team, so I can't speak for them, but I feel like React in general has kept itself away from being a framework and stayed a library. So if that kind of thing is going to come from anywhere, I think it's going to come from the meta frameworks like Remix or Next.js, who might say, here's more boilerplate code for you, built in. But at the same time, there is so much open source stuff that's available. I think there is a degree of hesitancy because opinions are so strong in the dev community that if a player like Next.js or Remix said, here's what a user a setup for having users that log in looks like on the back end, and here's the TypeScript, and here the definitions of the types and everything, they're going to be up against some subset of developers that say this is terrible and I hate this and I don't like how this works. And so then it becomes a question sometimes of opinionated versus flexible. And I think that in order to get what you're talking about, you will have to be using an extremely opinionated meta framework. And maybe we'll get there. But I think that that really would be what would be needed for that to fully come to fruition. That's just my opinion.
Howdy. I was listening to Xavier talk about the, if I may, the issues with like deployment times. I've been doing continuous deployment and integration for a while, trying to find different opportunities for that. I think a lot of the, uh, I can't really say modern, but tree shaking is a really good way to reduce bundle size. And then a lot of these modules have a lot of different files that you're not using. It's not just shaking the files, but like readmes, logos, all that stuff. Um, and I haven't seen a whole lot of, maybe I just haven't looked at enough, but CDNs. Um, I don't know if that stopped being popular and we just started bundling everything together, like every single front end plugin or component library. But I think if, um, especially with the concerns around open source development, like in the EU, I just came back from All Things Open, which was a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of concern around um, open source software because the EU just passed this Cybersecurity Resilience Act. I think a case could be made that if a lot of your open source software is coming from a CDN and that host is like, authorized, certified, complies with privacy laws that people are okay with, I think that would be an excellent answer to security concerns as long as that standalone dependency coming from a CDN could be well trusted by policymakers. That's all I had to say.
And I think the point I was getting at is, I understand for React doesn't want to be a framework, and please forgive me. It's just when you're dealing with so many projects, and you have to do these small details of these little, like these these tedious this tedious work, it just helps mentally with your wellness, because there's nothing more frustrating when you're not adhering to type safety, right? And at least it would be create a sense of peace of mind. And we have to, I think in the tech industry, we forget that wellness is necessary. And because we forget that, we forget how sometimes these little small tedious things wears on your mental. And so sometimes when you're dealing with dozens of projects, or even sometimes your own personal robust projects, just locating where the type error is and all that, it just be great to have I know there might be some open source, but honestly, like you said, you have these big players like React, Next.js, and we can go all so forth, but we rely on you guys, or we rely on these bigger platforms, because there's nothing, like you said, open source is great, and maybe you can find it. But if when you're dealing with a bunch of projects and all this stuff, and I love open source, I've done my own project, right? Well, sometimes you rely on them to give you a sense of security. And so at least the least they can do is create a if even if they're not going to do the framework approach, they can say best. I know they already have somewhat TypeScript best practice, but when I mean best practice, I mean a standard library, or library of word list of something, it's just, here's some examples of authorization, or here's some examples of user TypeScript. Here's some examples of enum TypeScripts. It's just, you just a foundation, at least, so people know where to start. Would just give us a peace of mind. And then maybe a lot of people don't use TypeScript, but I really see TypeScript helping me so much when I do have it. When you can infer right there and the type right there, that's amazing. And so to make it easier, it just will help our mental health too. These small little acts of services to us, the least they can do.
Hi. I think that as we talk, Tony, it depends of the for example the framework or the library, because currently React is not opinionated, and you can find some frameworks that are opinionated. For example, as we mentioned before, Remix, Net.js has all this structure, and I think that React try to, I am not part of the team, but try to give to the community the flexibility that you can create at your style the things, and this it can be wrong or can be good, because it's not wrong. It's like it can follow the good practice or can follow the not good practice. But for example, React is not similar to Angular that has all these kind of has, for example, Angular is a framework and has the authorization, has the way that you need to create the components, the way that you need to create the services, and has all this structure that is opinionated. So I think that the main thing that we have is that React is not opinionated, is more flexible, and this brings this good thing or bad thing, that is you can put your library as much as you want, and you can use, for example, for the that you mentioned, that the deployment you can use Webpack, Bit, and use your for example, I don't know, Berserk, Clover, or something else to do all the deployment. So I think that this part that is so flexible, I think that is not bad, because you can create a unique solution. Not so unique, but a little unique.
I think we can finish on that, especially we are almost run out of time. Thank you so much for being here today with us. It was a pleasure to host all of you. It was a very interesting discussion. I wanted to also invite you for a tomorrow Twitter space, which will be about testing unit, end-to-end, and integration. So if you have a time, please join us. It's gonna be at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So one more time, thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.